What is up, guys? Frosty Austy 0232 here today for another Frosty Features. We are at our final member of the P.E.G.A.S.U.S team, the Tech Raid team we all have been waiting for because Bionic Avengers just haven't been performing the way we need them to, right? So, this is our final member. What this is, if you haven't been here before, Frosty Features is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force. And I'm the guy that's gonna give it. Alright, let's go. According to Scopely, this is the description given in the blog post about the incoming character. We will judge the hell out of this when we get to the end, right? Well, we're going to get through it, and then we're going to come back to it, right? So, Ironheart MKII, Model 2, a gifted engineering student obsessed with producing her own version of the Iron Man suit, Riri Williams became a guest of the Wakandans after meeting Okoye and Shuri during the events of Marvel Studios' Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. With Shuri's aid and access to advanced machine fabrication technology, Riri was able to complete the Mark II version of her Ironheart power armor just in time to aid the counterattack and ambush of Namor and the N.A.T.A.L.I.E. That's right. From aboard the Wakandan transport ship Sea Leopard. We're good. So we're going to talk about that moving forward. We are doing comic book background. Typically, we stick in the Marvel 616 universe, the main continuity. This is obviously referencing the MCU. Read into that what you will. This is Ironheart. So as you see here, this is the model we see in the Power Armor team. This is the Ironheart in the comics, right? So we're talking about Ironheart Model 2. Ironically, the Ironheart that is in Power Armor team is Ironheart Model 3. So we're releasing an earlier version. Kind of like we did with Captain America, I guess. So it's fine. Name! Riri Williams. First appearance, Invincible Iron Man, Volume 3, Number 7, back in 2016. I actually own this comic. I didn't get it out because why have something cool to show, right? But I do own that that's one of my grails, is I own that comic. Powers and abilities, none. Riri is just a super intelligent individual. So the ability being super intelligence does count. An armor that grants various superhuman abilities, akin to Iron Man. Take what Iron Man does, apply it to Riri. Superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, flight, AI controlled. Reflexes coming from the AI, of course. Concussive and laser blasts, things like that. And the ability to constantly be updating armor, right? So, namely what I want to achieve in today's Frosty feature is to kind of show the difference between the MCU Riri and the comic book Riri. The MCU Riri, honestly, is quite the watered-down version. Aliases, no duel. As far as I am aware in my comic book readings, let me know in the comments down below whether or not there's something else she goes by, but the only thing I'm aware of is that she goes by Ironheart. She didn't have any other ideas of names beforehand. She just went with Ironheart, which is cool. That's fine with me. So as far as I'm aware, no other aliases confirmed besides, the studio or the company calls her Invincible Iron Man when she takes that role in the comics, but that's not actually her name. Her name is Ironheart, so it doesn't count. Affiliations: Underground, Champions, and the Red Room. So she actually had affiliations with the same thing that produces a Yelena Belova or a Black Widow. Champions is sort of her main. She doesn't have too many constant teams. Coming around in 2016, she still hasn't been in that much stuff. Namely, what you see with her is her solo adventures and her hanging out with the Champions. And for those of you who don't read comics, the Champions essentially are a separate Young Avengers type, right? We got Amadeus Cho, Braun, and Miss Marvel's even in the Champions at some time. So the Champions is sort of her main team affiliation. She also is a part of the Underground, which is a most people that don't read comics know that Captain America came out as a Hydra agent and was took over the country, and the Underground was a resistance team to rise up against that Hydra thing, and the Champions came out of that. So that she starts there and ends up in the Champions. So those are the affiliations. No affiliation with Pegasus. Project Pegasus is in the comics. Look it up. Look it up. Who died? Because you can't be a superhero or supervillain without somebody dying to make you do so. So, hers is a little more complicated because they don't all die at the same time, but ultimately, her father dies, Demetrius, and that kind of leads her to, she acts out, she gets taken to a psychologist because she's acting out, and then, this is at the age of 5, and then the psychologist is like, yo, hold on, pause, she is not intellectually stimulated, she is a super genius, holy crap. And everyone's like, oh man, wow. And then her mom, Ronnie, gets remarried and she gets a stepfather. And she gets his best friend and she's living life. And she's like, I'm a normal kid again. Everything's great. Let's go have a picnic in the park. And then Gary's like, yeah, I'm going to take you and your best friend to have a picnic in the park. And so they're having the picnic in the park. And then a drive-by happens and Natalie and Gary are killed. Origins. So, Riri takes to, this is when she's 10, Riri takes to building new tools and gadgets, things like that, in hopes for superheroes to use them, and because of these tools and gadgets, she creates, she ends up getting a scholarship to MIT at the age of 11, and so she starts attending MIT, and then she starts stealing parts from MIT and building her Ironheart suit, Mach 1, Model 1, and we'll talk about Model 1 in a little while, but ultimately, that's how she ends up on the road to becoming Ironheart. Background, Chicago in South Shore. She is born and raised in Chicago, and that's the thing, right? Somebody not from New York? What are we gonna do? The MCU are criminals. So I want to point this out. This was one of my biggest complaints about Black Panther Wakanda Forever. If you haven't seen it by now, as of the recording date, it's been out for a very long time, so I don't feel bad giving spoilers. But ultimately, I don't think it's a spoiler. They portrayed her much older than she is in the comics. So when I say that the MCU version of Ironheart is a watered-down version of Riri Williams, I feel like expressing that Riri Williams, super genius, going to MIT at a very young age versus Riri Williams, played by a 25, 24-year-old actress in college. You lower the impact of intelligence or effect, right? You lose effect, which kind of sucks. The actress is great. I know there was some stuff on set with her where people had a thing, but I think she did good. I enjoyed the movie. I didn't think it was great, but anyway, it was fine, which in Phase 4, fine's good, right? But all that to say, I just feel like they didn't really do Riri Williams justice because it should have been played by a much younger actress. And by much younger, I mean like half her age, even though she's 25, but it should be, Ironheart's a teenager, 100%. But she is super genius. They played her very smart. That's fine. But it should have been essentially that character, but much younger. So, MCU are criminals. Who's surprised? Riri is a nickname. So, one thing I think is a really interesting thing to point out. Her father, Demetrius Williams, his nickname was Riri. And she was born very shortly after he was killed, supposedly, it was faked. In a gas station robbery. So she actually gets her name from her father's nickname, which is Riri. So he's, in a way, if you look at some of the Wikipedia things, it's Riri Williams Sr. That's not the situation. It's Demetrius Riri Williams. So, cool. Personality issues. Another thing that I think is important to point out, due to her super genius intellect, and Riri just, often what comes with that is a sort of dissociation from social norms. So a big thing with Riri's character in the comics and not necessarily the MCU is that she is not as socially aware. She's very, think Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory. She's very set in her ways. She doesn't interact with people super well. Even to the point where, this is my interpretation of comics, she comes off as asexual quite a bit. Which we actually talked about in Frosty Features Viv Vision. There is a situation where Viv tries to kiss Riri, and Riri's like, yeah, I don't really feel feelings at all, sort of. So, like, let's just be friends. And Viv's like, okay. Watch Frosty Features Vision. So, one other thing I want to point out, I said it earlier, this is the Ironheart Model 3 that we're looking at here, the one that's in Power Armor team. And also in the comics, this is Model 2. This is Ironheart Model 2. So, the Ironheart MKII that we're talking about is only from the MCU. Model 2 directly looks like Iron Man, and there are some pretty good reasons for that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Relationships. So as I said before, we have a bit of social awkwardness. So her friends are a little scarce. She shares a lot of the Rogues Gallery and Friends of Iron Man, but as far as relationships, she doesn't have romantic relationships as of this recording date, up to what I've read, right? I could always be wrong. Let me know in the comments. So relationships. Ronnie and Demetrius Williams are her parents. Gary is her stepfather. I couldn't find Gary's last name, so it's Gary. And then Sharon Williams is her sister. And that's it. She's got a couple of friends out there, but besides that, she gets mentored by Tony Stark, and we'll talk about that next. Notable events. MK1, that is Model 1. So, how does Riri become Ironheart? We gave a little bit of an intro into it ahead of time, but let's dive into it just a little bit more. So, as Riri is trying to create these gadgets and tools for the aid of superheroes, she ends up getting a mock-up model, a blueprint, if you will, of the Model 41 Iron Man suit. And what she decides to do to challenge herself, she's like, Iron Man is the peak of technology, therefore I should challenge myself as the super genius I am to recreate an Iron Man suit. So, based off the Model 41, she decides to re-engineer and try to make her own suit. So, what is pictured here is her Model 1, which is much more masculine in appearance, obviously, because it's based directly off the Iron Man armor, and it is a little more fragile, right? But she did this by stealing pieces of stuff from MIT, just like in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I believe that's what was happening. Anyway, so, with that, the security guards are like, hey, all this important stuff is missing. What do we do? Oh, let's go check out this chick who seems like she's stealing it. And she's like, yeah, I better get out of here. So she puts the suit on, and she flies away, and she's flying around the United States, really just trying to get a sense of how the armor works and things like that, because she started it, but she has to learn how to pilot and stuff, just like good old Tony Stark did. But as she's doing so, she witnesses in New Mexico, she witnesses a jailbreak where these inmates are escaping in a truck, and she's like, I'm in an Iron Man suit, let me stop this shiz. So she jumps down in front of the truck and's like, I'm this person, hear me roar. And she sticks her hands out. She's like, I'm gonna stop this truck, no probs. And she does stop the truck, but her entire suit is destroyed. Just absolutely cracked and destroyed. She's like, well, I failed that endeavor. That sucks. So, she completed the mission. She failed the perfect recreation of the Model 41 armor. But then, in licking her wounds, she takes the parts that she can, and she goes back to try to fix it, where she is approached, just like in the MCU with Spider-Man. Tony Stark shows up, and he's like, hey, I saw you do this Iron Man thing over here in New Mexico, and I found that pretty interesting. How about I help you, because I'm Iron Man? And she's like, hell yeah, you're Iron Man. Let's do this. And he's like, but hold on. Civil War II is happening. Civil War II being Iron Man versus Captain Marvel, not Captain America. Civil War II is happening, so this is what's going to happen. I'm going to help you rebuild the armor that broke, and you're going to help me fight Captain Marvel. And Ironheart's like, yeah, let's do that. So, and she's actually not Ironheart at this point. She's just Riri. So Civil War II happens, and Iron Man ends up in a coma, and Riri is like, ah, crap. Like, he was going to help me out, and I was, going to be financially stable and stuff. What do I do? And then, boop, AI Tony Stark. So, for anybody who's been on my channel for more than a week, you probably know that the way, there's the whole thing with, will Robert Downey Jr. return? How does he return? In the comics, Tony Stark comes back as an AI. And so he actually serves as Riri's AI when he returns. He's like, hey, I'm artificial intelligence, even though my body's in a coma. I'm pretty much me, and me was helping ye, so let's start working, right? So they make the Ironheart Model 2 suit, which is the Iron Man replica that you've seen before, that I showed the picture of in the last slide. So they start working together, and she operates as Ironheart in this Ironheart Model 2 situation, eventually moving on to there's a situation where she fights Blackheart with the champions. She joins the champions, things like that, comes out of the champions, and she creates, and this is after Tony wakes up from the coma, she creates her own AI, which is what we're going to talk about next. So she creates N.A.T.A.L.I.E. So the Iron Man Ironheart armors work off of AI. Originally, she is using the AI from her first Model 1 didn't have AI. Model 2 has the Tony Stark AI. Model 3 has this AI she develops called N.A.T.A.L.I.E. This is another challenge to herself, and what she's doing is she's having a computer scan her brainwaves to map and make a AI to suit her, and in doing so, it recreates her childhood friend who was part of her trauma to become a superhero, N.A.T.A.L.I.E., but in an aged up version, and N.A.T.A.L.I.E. becomes her AI, and of course, it had to come with an acronym, because everything's got to be an acronym when it comes to AIs in Marvel. So, N.A.T.A.L.I.E. stands for Neuro Autonomous Technical Assistant and Laboratory Intelligence Entity. Great. So, she gets N.A.T.A.L.I.E., and with that, she ends up looking for a childhood, after speaking with N.A.T.A.L.I.E. and quasi-reminiscing, because N.A.T.A.L.I.E.'s not brought back to life. She's recreated as an AI that is similar to her childhood friend. But regardless, she goes to track down another childhood friend named Daja Hamilton, who seems to have been kidnapped by the Ten Rings, but then we find out that maybe she was working with the Ten Rings. But N.A.T.A.L.I.E. assists Riri in tracking down Daja, who then she runs into Clash. And Clash is a villain in Marvel that works with the Ten Rings, and Clash gets his ass kicked, and right before he leaves, he's like, hey, Riri Williams, here is this token of the Ten Rings. You would make an excellent villain. I hope that you consider this offer. And then he leaves. So after he leaves, she goes to try to... So Daja leaves in the event that she fights Clash. When that happens, Daja disappears. She goes to find Daja again. She finds a bunch of kidnapped kids, and she runs into Midnight's Fire, which is a different Ten Rings villain, and she's fighting him, and he also offers her to join Ten Rings, and she's like, nah, but she's starting to have these like dark, like, oh man, am I really that close to a villain? What do I do? But she rejects it again, and in doing so, she frees a bunch of kidnapped kids who were kidnapped under the at the behest of a politician named Thomas Birch, which ends up she gets a reward for turning in Thomas Birch and getting the Birch conspiracy, and she gets a lot of money, and she decides to drop out of MIT and open her own laboratory, and that's essentially where we're at in the comics, right? So, Birch conspiracy, it's a thing. Check it out. Power level. Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power level, but here on Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works, if you are a multiversal power level, what that means is you will end all of reality. Not just your reality, the entire multiverse will topple at your behest. Universal means that you can end your reality, maybe hop on over to another reality, and end it there. Cosmic means you are a threat on a planetary scale on the small end, and can take out things like solar systems or galaxies with enough time and effort. Nuclear means you have power baseline level equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb. You can level things like small cities up to a planetary body with enough force. Super Soldier means that you are beyond the capabilities of a human being in every way, and you can level things like brick walls or buildings/city blocks. Once again, with enough time and force and will, right? Our baseline for Super Soldier comes out at a Captain America. City means that you are a human trained to the absolute peak of human ability. This is where we see a lot of Marvel's secret agents, CIA, mercenaries. This is where we see an awful lot of them fall. And then there's Greg. Greg's the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and he's, constant spawn society's pretty easy to beat. So, due to undead Asgardian physiology and the fact that I just want to say it, I equate Greg's power level to that of a regular human being. I, being a regular human being, besides my Frosty powers, theoretically armed with a bag of surgical masks and a fly swatter and enough anger, I theoretically could take Greg out as a human being. Throw down, right? So, in the case of Riri Williams, what do we have? We have a slightly watered down Ironheart, or Iron Man. It is what it is. She never actually, she's still relatively new. She has not achieved the achievements of Iron Man, but due to the fact that she is based off of Iron Man, she is very securely planted in the nuclear power level. She has the capability to level things like small cities fairly easily. This is a character, due to who she's based off of, that can scale much higher than that, right? Because Iron Man definitely has planet-busting tech and things like that. We just don't have an example of Ironheart having the same thing. Also, as a reminder, for people looking to flame me in the comments, not that it's happened, but in the event that you felt like it, influence is not the same as power level, right? So somebody can have a much bigger influence. Her influence is definitely in the cosmic area, but as far as initial power level, what she can put out, Riri Williams, nuclear level. And according to Scopely, some of you probably knew this from the beginning, but they just skipped over the comic books altogether and just went for the MCU stuff, the watered down Riri. I'm sorry. So that lands us at comic book cop-out. They didn't even look at the comics. They didn't care. They're just leading into the MCU because it's easier and people identify with it more. But it's based off source material, baby. Those are comics. So, that is Frosty Features Ironheart. I hope that you all enjoyed it. I hope that you all give me a like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. Please, it helps me out so much, and it doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. As a reminder, I stream every Sunday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time at the link above, where we do Frosty Features live. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, y'all, stay cool.